Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something I think is really fundamental for anyone interested in, well, how we learn about the world, especially science.
Mm.
How do we make science education, chemistry specifically, feel less like just memorizing stuff?
And more like the actual process of discovery. Yeah, it's a big question.
It really is. Because when science just feels like a list of facts to learn,
You lose something, don't you? That spark, that excitement of figuring things out, it has real consequences.
totally. And our map for this exploration today is a really interesting research article. It's called Polytechnic Chemistry as a Model for the Transition to Research-Based Teaching. It's by Serhiy Andreevich Kontovoy.
Right.
And what struck me is that it doesn't just, point out the problems we all kind of know exist in science education.
It actually offers some concrete ideas, some pathways forward.
Exactly. So our mission, if you will, is to unpack these ideas. We want to understand how we can shift traditional teaching towards something that really sparks curiosity, builds those research skills.
Yeah. And ultimately, see how this could give you, the listener, a deeper and more relevant understanding of chemistry and maybe science in general. More fascinating, frankly.
Definitely more fascinating. So the article dives right in, tackling a problem that's been around for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, this tendency to teach the finished product. Here are the facts, the theories.
Without really showing the messy journey of how we got there.
Exactly. Like, here's the photo, but nothing about the photographer, the camera, the darkroom process.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And the author suggests this isn't new. It's kind of baked into how teachers themselves are often trained.
That's a key point. It's a historical pattern.
It reminds me of learning history by just memorizing dates. You miss the whole story, the debates, how historians even figure things out.
Right. And there's another hurdle the article highlights, even at universities where professors are doing research.
I think students would be involved, right?
Well, you would, but apparently it's often hard to really integrate bachelor students into that work. The way the programs are structured often just doesn't make space for it.
That seems like such a massive missed opportunity.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the article argues that if students don't get that early taste of research, well, they might not be interested or prepared for it later, like at the master's level.
So it creates this gap between knowing about science and actually doing science.
Precisely. And this isn't just a local thing either. The article points to a bigger picture, a global trend, actually.
Just
Fewer students choosing natural sciences overall.
really?
Yeah, and even fewer wanting to go on to masters or PhDs in these areas. And get this, even at some really top European universities, doing research as an undergrad is often just optional, an add-on.
Wow. Not fundamental. That's surprising.
It is, isn't it? Especially when you think about what science is. It's asking questions, exploring. But the student role can sometimes feel quite passive in the traditional setup.
So what's the alternative then?
Well, that's where the article introduces this idea of research-based teaching and learning. RBTRBL, for short.
RBTRBL.
Okay. And importantly, this isn't some radical new idea. It's actually been a recognized approach for, over 30 years.
30 years. So we've known about this for a while. What's the core idea?
Basically, it's about bringing that missing piece, the research process, the methods, the whole mindset into learning itself to make it more, interesting and relevant.
Makes sense. Bringing the how back into the what.
Exactly. The article mentions something called the big picture approach in schools. That's cited as a kind of problem-focused RBL model, though it apparently takes a huge amount of teacher commitment.
Right. It sounds intensive. So how does this RBTRBL actually work? Does it look different in different contexts?
Yeah, the article breaks it down quite nicely. It talks about the teaching research nexus, different ways teaching and research can connect.
Okay.
So first, there's learning from research. That's basically getting the knowledge that already exists, theories, findings, the established stuff.
Standard textbook learning, more or less.
Kind of, yeah. Then there's learning about research. That's understanding the methods, the techniques scientists use, how they design experiments, analyze data.
Okay. Getting a peek behind the curtain.
Right. And then the third level is learning through research. This is where students actually do research. They investigate things themselves to get that deeper knowledge.
Ah, okay. So it's like knowing the destination, knowing how to read the map, and then actually making the journey yourself.
That's a perfect way to put it, a progression of engagement.
And the article gets even more specific, doesn't it, with that classification based on focus and student role.
It does. It uses two dimensions. Is the focus on research content, the findings, or the research process, the methods, and are students an audience, passive, or participants, active?
Okay. Let's break that down.
So you get 4 types. Research-led, focus on content, students are the audience, just listening to findings.
Okay.
Research-oriented, focus shifts to the process, but students are still mostly listening, learning about methods. Research-tutored, now students are participants, they're active, but the main goal is still mastering existing content, maybe through exercises based on research.
Right.
And finally, research-based. This is the one the article really pushes for. Students are active participants, and the focus is on both the process and the content. They're involved in generating knowledge.
Learning through research.
Yeah,
Actively doing it.
exactly. It's about shifting from passively learning about science to actively doing science.
And the argument is that universities should really view learning itself as a kind of ongoing research process, right? That these inquiry experiences need to be core to undergrad education.
Absolutely. And this lines up so well with what students today seem to want. They're looking for relevance, for engagement, for things that connect to careers.
It's not just about the degree anymore.
Not at all. It's about fostering innovation, critical thinking, collaboration, even thinking across different disciplines. Those are the skills that matter now.
Skills, not just facts. And the article mentions some places actually doing this. In Norway.
Yeah, Western Norway University of Applied Sciences and Volda University College are mentioned as examples. They're actively trying to embed research into teaching to empower students, help them become innovators.
That's encouraging, so it is happening.
It is. And the demand for this kind of research-based education, or RBE, is apparently growing across Europe.
But there are challenges, obviously.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
The article points out that many experienced teachers might have been trained differently, maybe more focused on practical classroom skills than the nitty-gritty of research methodology.
So it requires a shift for educators, too, not just students, adapting their approach.
A big shift, potentially. And interestingly, there's even a mention of some research on sociology students in these RBL programs.
Oh, yeah. What did that find?
Well, it found that while their cognitive research skills, their ability to do research increased,
Uh-huh.
their effective motivational ones, like their enthusiasm, their interests, sometimes dipped.
Oh, that's not ideal.
It seems a huge factor was the instructor's own interest and passion. If the teacher was genuinely engaged, the students stayed engaged and enjoyed it more.
Ah, the human element. It always comes back to that, doesn't it? It's not just the system, it's the people making it work.
Absolutely. And this all ties into a broader shift the article mentions in higher education generally,
Lucas.
moving from just job training to developing broader capabilities, from being purely work-oriented to more life-oriented learning, and crucially, from a teaching paradigm to a learning paradigm.
Putting the learner first.
Right. And that demands innovation, using digital tools smartly, enhancing the whole student experience.
And didn't the article mention a dialogue with an AI about this? Claude AI.
It did. Just to get a clear definition, RBT, research-based teaching, is more about instructors modeling research practices, showing how it's done.
Yeah.
And RBL, research-based learning, is when students are actively doing those research-like activities themselves.
Yeah, and it gave chemistry examples.
Yeah, things like tackling open-ended lab problems instead of just following a recipe, or investigating real-world industrial processes, figuring out how they work or could be improved.
That really makes it concrete, which leads us nicely into the article's own specific models, right? Polytechnic chemistry and WTIM.
Exactly. These are presented as practical ways to implement these ideas.
Okay, let's start with Polytechnic chemistry. What's the core idea there?
It's about weaving research right into the standard chemistry topics, but with a specific focus on substances that are really important industrially, things produced or used on a large scale.
Interesting. So not just abstract concepts, but stuff with real-world relevance. How does it work?
Well, the strategy is kind of counterintuitive at first. It actually suggests reducing the sheer volume of facts you try to cover.
Less is more.
Kind of. The idea is to free up time to focus more deeply on the history behind key discoveries and the current research happening around these industrial substances.
So depth over breadth. Understanding the story and the ongoing work.
Precisely. Aiming for deeper understanding and better critical thinking, not just surface-level memorization.
So instead of just learning Reaction X, you'd explore maybe who discovered it, how thinking about it changed over time, what research is happening now related to its industrial use.
Exactly. It becomes a narrative, a living field of study. And the article suggests this framework can connect different areas of chemistry, inorganic, organic, electrochemistry, polymers.
all through the lens of these important industrial reactions and technologies.
hmm And it includes not just the big products, but also basic reagents like ammonia synthesis is mentioned and auxiliary things like electrochemical sensors used in industry.
Makes sense. Is there a suggested order to study things?
Yeah, it proposes sequencing based on the complexity of the research involved, both historically and currently, starting simpler and moving towards more complex areas.
And the underlying philosophy seems to be learning through real examples of scientific investigation.
That's the key takeaway. It feels like a much more natural way to learn science by seeing how it's actually done.
Okay, then there's the other project mentioned, water treatment in the middle, or WTM. How's that fit in?
WTM is presented as maybe a quicker way to get started with research-based learning, specifically within a master's program context.
Focused on water treatment.
Right. It uses water treatment as a central theme to explore the chemistry and technology involved.
But isn't water treatment often seen as environmental science or civil engineering?
It often is, yeah. But what's clever about this project is how it emphasizes the chemistry aspects, specifically the synthesis, research, and application of the chemical reagents and materials used in water treatment. That makes it really relevant for chemical technology students.
I see. So it uses a practical, maybe seemingly tangential topic to dive deep into core chemistry principles and applications. Very interdisciplinary.
Exactly. And it's designed to be flexible, too. The article suggests it can be adapted for departments with different strengths, maybe more focused on materials science or organic chemistry.
By emphasizing the relevant auxiliary materials used in water treatment.
Precisely. Or adapted for shorter programs by adjusting the balance between the tech side and the fundamental chemistry.
And it opens up different career paths too, presumably.
Yeah, the article mentions researchers, managers, chemical engineers, a good range.
What are the core components of WDTIM? What do students actually do?
It's very hands-on research focused. Synthesizing or modifying reagents, testing them, developing the technology around them, and crucially, designing curriculum that focuses on how facts are discovered, not just the facts themselves, plus that historical context again.
So it's research through and through, and the suggestion is this could be a good first year for a master's.
Yeah, providing that solid research-based foundation before students specialize for their thesis work.
Okay, moving on slightly, the article then brings up computer modeling. That seems crucial today.
Absolutely vital. And it points out something interesting, how often undergrad chemistry programs don't really make good use of existing chemical databases.
Like searchable libraries of chemical facts and properties.
Exactly. And even less training in how to actually use them effectively, like with database languages, SQL or NoSQL.
Which seems like a huge gap in today's world, right? Everything is data-driven.
It really is. The article argues these skills should be standard for chemists now, necessary for navigating all the information out there. It even mentions how data scientists pick this up naturally.
Is there good news on that front? Tools to help.
Yes, definitely. The article highlights the rise of no-code visual development tools. Things like Flutterflow, BuildShip are mentioned.
Tools that let you build software and databases without being a hardcore programmer.
Essentially, yes, making it much more accessible for scientists, for educators to create their own digital tools.
That's potentially game-changing.
It really could be. The article also mentions existing software for things like experiment planning, data processing, R, Python libraries, Julia.
Stuff scientists use.
Right. And tools for interpreting data from instruments. But it notes these are rarely used in a full-on virtual simulator mode for teaching.
So we have pieces, but not the whole integrated simulation.
That seems to be the gap. A comprehensive software environment that simulates the entire research workflow, from planning to analysis to iteration, something students could really get hands-on with virtually.
And the idea is that these new no-code tools, maybe with some AI help, could actually empower chemistry teachers to build these simulators themselves.
That's the exciting prospect, putting the tool building power in the hands of the educators. It mentions data orange mining as one existing visual tool that could be a starting point.
But there's still missing pieces for a full simulation.
Yeah, the article lists things like simulating reagent calculations and prep, designing the virtual experimental setup, generating realistic data, and this is key, evaluating the success of the virtual experiment and letting students iterate, try again.
Just like real research, trial and error.
Exactly. That iterative loop is fundamental.
So we have the models, the tools,
Yeah.
but the article also talks about the learning environment, right? The atmosphere.
Hugely important, the psychological setting.
And it suggests that often in schools and universities, the vibe isn't really conducive to inquiry.
Yeah, it points out that the focus can become so heavily skewed towards just getting good grades in the required subjects.
They can actually dampen that natural curiosity,
Yeah.
kill the fun of exploring.
Unfortunately, yes. It contrasts this a bit with programming education, which often seems better at fostering that problem-solving, try-it-out kind of mindset, even if it's more engineering-focused.
So what's the solution? How do you create that better atmosphere?
The article suggests deliberately simulating a research-like setting, shifting the goalposts. It's not just about learning what's already known.
But about critically analyzing how we know it, while still learning the facts, of course.
Right, understanding the process, the limitations, the open questions.
Mhm.
It suggests virtual labs focused on tackling novel problems, exploring current research, why it matters, how it's done, what drives it.
For chemical technology specifically.
The emphasis is on exploring ways to actually improve things. Production parameters, quantity, quality, efficiency, environmental impact.
Things that usually only come up maybe in a master's thesis.
Often, yeah. But without students having necessarily built the skills beforehand to tackle those kinds of optimization problems effectively.
So the idea is for teachers to almost simulate being an engineering company, tasked with improving a process.
That's a great way to put it. It connects learning directly to what graduates might do, and it lets students see the relevance of the curriculum, maybe even critique it.
That's empowering. And virtual exchange for supervising student research.
Yeah, connecting teachers with specific expertise to supervise school students' projects remotely, regardless of location, pooling resources.
It all comes back to making learning spaces feel like research spaces, doesn't it? Places you want to be to explore.
Exactly. Engaging active hubs of inquiry, not just passive information transfer.
Now, to make all this happen systemically, the article argues for some kind of infrastructure, right? A platform.
Yes, a crucial piece. It highlights the need for an open international platform, a place to develop, share, and critique these research-based curricula.
And a new kind of journal.
Right, an original journal specifically for publishing adapted research materials, taking real research findings.
And making them accessible
Yeah.
to students, educators, even scientists in other fields.
Precisely. Ideally written or adapted by the original researchers themselves. And these articles would include analysis of the background knowledge needed, the skills involved.
Making them super useful for designing courses or even just for someone wanting to understand research outside their own specialty.
Exactly. A bridge between cutting-edge research and practical education.
And then there's this bigger idea,
Yeah.
the Academy of Total Science. What's that about?
It's envisioned as a kind of international community. Think of it like a professional yet inclusive social network or platform.
For who?
For everyone involved in science, really. Professional scientists, teachers, maybe bringing their students along, research enthusiasts, all levels.
A big tent for science engagement. How would it work?
The idea is a sort of club system with different sections for different interests, creating a comfortable, supportive environment for people to engage with science, collaborate, maybe move between sections as their interests grow.
That sounds really appealing. The article notes there aren't many non-political, non-religious clubs like that anymore, right?
Yeah, and that online social networks can often feel quite superficial. This academy could potentially foster deeper connections, trust, collaborative problem solving.
Counteracting that social atomization the article mentions.
Potentially, yes, creating a real community around the shared interest in scientific inquiry.
Okay, so wrapping up the article's main points, it comes back to the effectiveness of RBT-RBL, doesn't it?
It does, reiterating that we've known for decades that these approaches work better than traditional methods.
Which, oddly, haven't always been analyzed as critically themselves.
Right, and the core weakness identified is teaching facts without the how they were derived validated.
And this persists because it's just how it's always been done, how teachers were taught. A cycle.
That's the argument, a self-perpetuating cycle. And it highlights that weird contradiction. University researchers have to do research, but often don't integrate it into their teaching.
Which feels fundamentally unnatural, the article argues.
Completely. It pushes strongly for curricula built from adapted research papers, monographs, dissertations.
Making Polytechnic chemistry the model for that.
Exactly. A model focusing on widely used substances, balancing fewer facts with deeper historical and current research context. A potential core for bachelor's degrees.
And WTIM is that quicker entry point. Using water treatment to teach core chemistry and applications, adaptable for universities and even schools.
Providing both foundational knowledge and practical relevance.
And the absolute necessity of computer modeling. software simulators.
Crucial. To model the whole research process, compensating for limited lab time, giving that hands-on virtual experience.
Along with the web platform and the new journal for sharing adapted research.
Yes, infrastructure to support the whole ecosystem.
And finally, it stresses the environment, positive, collaborative virtual labs, and the need for a new type of teacher.
To educate a new type of student who might become the next generation of teachers, all feeding into this Academy of Total Science, maybe.
Fostering lifelong research potential. It's a big vision.
It really is. So if we bring our deep dive to a landing here, the big takeaway is this push for a real shift, isn't it? Away from just facts towards the process of science, making it research-driven.
Yeah, and we looked at how projects like Polytechnic Chemistry and WTIM offer concrete ways to do that.
Highlighting how vital computer modeling is becoming and this vision of a collaborative Academy of Total Science to keep that inquiry going.
And for you listening, the potential payoff here is huge, right? A deeper understanding, better critical thinking skills, useful everywhere, not just in science, and maybe just a greater appreciation for how dynamic knowledge actually is.
Getting those real aha moments.
Exactly. So maybe a final thought to leave you with.
Consider this. How could adopting more of a research mindset in your own life, that habit of asking questions, digging deeper, seeking understanding, how could that change how you approach challenges, how you learn new things, whatever your field?
Yeah, how could that way of thinking transform your own explorations? Something to chew on.